Now, you've mentioned a lot about like intersectionalities, and I think it's really important to address like the Latinx and the queer. There is so much to like cover and explore. But in your experience, what would you say would be like the most important thing to know about these intersectionalities?
Oh gosh, being aware of it is the first step. I think having awareness and figuring out what that intersectionality looks like is important because in reality, we all have intersecting identities, except the way that those intersections present themselves is going to vary from person to person. And the complexity of those intersections is also going to vary from person to person. Um, one important thing that I would say to people is don't, compromise your identity and your intersection, your identities, meaning your intersectionality, for someone else, just because that's too much for someone else. And the reason why I say that is because personally, I am very much an intersectional person in terms of my identities. I mean, I speak Spanish. I'm Mexican American. I work in the medical profession. I work in academia, and there's also intersectionality with my socioeconomic status as well. Being middle class, having a formal college education, things like that. Those are all factors within my intersectionality. And there's a lot of times that personally I feel like I am sacrificing my identity to appease others because my intersectionality is too much for them. And to kind of just give you an example, there's a lot of times that I feel like our communities, our queer communities are so segregated by race, by gender, by language, by education, by geographic location, all these different things factor into it. And that we end up, I mean, segregating to the community so much to a point that people end up feeling ostracized because it's like this battle of, well, if you're this, you can't fit with this group. And so for me, I feel like a lot of times I'm compromising my identity in that, I'm too white for my Latinx community. I am too queer for that community as well, but then I'm not white enough for my queer community, and then I'm not trans enough for my trans community, and things like that. And so I think if we could just get rid of like this idea of compartmentalizing everything and just be like, yeah, intersectionality does exist. And, we are people at the end of the day. And so I think understanding that, yes, that intersectionality is going to be different from anybody, it's different for everybody, but also embracing it and recognizing it is going to be important, and understanding that, pushing people to feel like they're on the margin of a margin of a margin because they're, you know, you have to be everything or you have to be nothing or you have to be something. It's just, it becomes overwhelming for people. And so, I wish that more people could just understand that intersectionality does exist. And just because, I'm queer, I'm trans, I have a college education, I'm middle class, I speak Spanish, doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to roll with other people in my community. And then my immediate community is only limited to the people that share that same identity. Um, and I just wish that wasn't the case because we're hurting ourselves, we're hurting our community. And I think in some regards, I worry that, as Latinx people, we're losing a lot of our culture too, because we're negating our culture and compromising it so it's not too overwhelming for other people. And I don't think that's fair. If I don't want to wave the Mexican flag and speak Spanish and also embrace my queer identity and be like, I'm openly trans, I should be able to do that.
Mhm.
But I feel like I censor so much of it just so I don't, you know, push away other people who are uncomfortable with embracing that intersectionality.
I think it plays a lot on not being able to see examples of these intersections, of not having like these leaders or these people that we can see and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I identify with this queer Latinx individual. So, Andy, what do you think would be, I think, the best way to help this representation to be more out there?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I would love to see other people that look like me in positions of power. People that look like me that are leading our queer and our trans movements, people that look like me that are out there on the front line, and speaking openly about their intersecting identities, speaking about the struggles that our communities face, and also, addressing those disparities and actually engaging the people who do have the needs to make change. I think a lot of times we don't, and this is a bigger issue. We don't have adequate representation, of what the average person looks like in that community. For instance, within our own Latinx community, there's a lot of discussion in a lot of our media how it is. I mean, I don't know how to say this in a better way, but whitewashed. A lot of our lead actors, people, on TV shows and things like that, people that are very much highly regarded in the Latinx community, oftentimes are the ones who have lighter skin, are the ones that have the most money, are the ones that have, that speak perfect English. And I think that having queer people, I think that having, average people, people who actually look like us and act like us and live our day to day lives would be, a better representation, of who we are, because we're not, at least in like our queer Latinx communities, I mean, we're not all super light skinned. We're not all super wealthy. Not all of us, speak perfect English or perfect Spanish. I mean, if you're obviously doing something in Spanish, then you better know what you're saying. But, just all these different things of that, we're not seeing people that look like us. And again, it's just another way of kind of ostracizing our communities, from, the things that we need, the things that would be seeing. And I do want to give just a quick example. And if you have to edit this out, I totally understand. It is a specific reference. But earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, a documentary came out called Disclosure. And that documentary is now available on Netflix. You can watch it for free. But the Disclosure documentary, is one of the first docs that talks about trans representation in the media and how important it is to see, for trans folks to see themselves accurately portrayed, in TV and film and acting and things like that. And it is a big issue in that, we oftentimes, if there's a trans character, more often than not, it's played by a cis person, so a non trans person. And then, take it a step further, there's not a lot of diversity with those actors. The majority are white folks. And so, being able to embrace our communities, being able to embrace the intersectionality, and being able to actually say, hey, let's have a trans character played by an actual trans person. That representation matters. That representation for some people's life and death. And so I wish that we had more of that. I wish that we had more representation of intersectionality as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to see ourselves out there and to see someone that we identify with, because we are not the norm.
Yeah.
And it's like a double non-norm. Like
Yeah, like a double
Latinx,
whammy. Yeah.
we're Latinx and queer, and there is obviously a lack of representation there. But I do want to thank you, Andy, for your words and your background and your story. I do feel like a lot of people, in some way or another, identify with your examples and your family. A lot of us are first generation or second generation. We live with our families. We live with um, grandparents. We have this connection with our whole family. And that is something that I think is very important to address, especially within the Latinx queer population.
Mhm.
And before we end, I do want to ask you one last question, and that is, what would you like to say to the Latinx population about queer people?
I, oh gosh, that's a tough question because I've never been asked that and I've never thought about that. What I would like to say to the Latinx community about queer people is that we're people too. We are, you guys, we are, I am Mexican. I do speak Spanish. My skin is brown. I mean, I exist. And I would hope that people in my Latinx community can still love and embrace me, even if their personal views don't align, with mine, even if, we might not believe the same things. Todos somos familia. And to just keep an open heart and open mind about people in our community because we know how important culture is to us. We know how important family is to us. And like you said, having intergenerational families, we are close. We are family. And those ties are, it's something that I would never want to see to be broken. I would never want to see broken. And, it's important for preserving our culture and preserving our history too. So don't turn your back on somebody just because they identify as queer. You know, they are more themselves than any other person. And they are more themselves than they have been before. And being able to be open about your identity, I mean, it saves lives for a lot of people. And to have that love and acceptance and that support is life or death for a lot of people as well. And so please don't turn your back on somebody just because your church doesn't agree with it, just because somebody in your family said that wasn't right, just because whatever reason it might be, find it in your heart to accept them and to be there for them and to offer them the support that they need. Because you know having to come out as queer and trans and then having that added layer of culture, of religion, of ethnicity, of any of that just makes it that much more difficult for us. And so, we need that support from the people who are going to love us unconditionally and are going to be there to support us unconditionally. And I just hope that, people can take that time to listen and take that time to realize that, yeah, you know, things are going to evolve over time in the way that we, look at gender, the way that we look at sexuality is going to evolve over time. And that's not going to make us any less Latinx. That's not going to take away from that identity. So I just can't stress enough how important it is to be there for your family, to be there for your community, to be there for the people that need it. Because we are living in a time where, racial tensions are high. And it is difficult for us. It's difficult, even just for the average Latinx person because of, the preconceived notions that people have and the stigmas that they attach to us. Now add another layer to it with sexuality and or gender. So please, please, please just take the time to listen to us. Just take the time to talk to us and take the time to be there for us because we need it.
Yeah. And I just want to echo that to everyone who's watching that we do need your support. We need people who understand us, and we also know that it takes time. So we don't expect all of you to immediately just open your arms. We know it takes time,
Mm-hmm.
but like Andy said, somos familia. We need to stick together, and we are still Latinx, even if we identify as queer.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, everyone, for watching. And thank you, Andy, for giving us your story. We really truly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, Napa.
So if anyone else has any questions or would like to know more, please contact me. My information will be in the caption, but we hope to see you all later. And just remember, we are family. Thank you.